very good morning to you. It is Monday, the 5th of December, 2022. I hope that you had a wonderful weekend. My name is Miriam Agutu. The show is Good Morning Africa, and as usual, we're coming to you from Kenya's capital here in Nairobi. And being a Monday, that means we have so much to catch up ourselves with that have been happening over the weekend. So let's just get into it. And I'll start by looking at the major news headlines from the country here in Kenya, and then just a few regional newspapers. The Daily Nation from Kenya, deadly voyage. That is the main headline. Safe houses to be established as temporary shelters for migrant workers in distress. For hundreds of young women leaving Kenya for the Middle East in search of domestic work every month, chances that they would give up the promise of a better life are slim. Despite tales of horror and death of the hands of the cruel employers, well, the promise by Labour CS Florence Bore to prioritize Saudi Arabia and safety interventions bring the madness to an end. That story is on page 2 and 3, and you just see the faces of some young Kenyan women who went but never returned, and a lot of them came back in caskets there. So this has been a very disturbing story. So hopefully something will be done, as we see now what is being done to solve that problem. Very well. Gachagua power plan, quest for Mount Kenya leadership linked to laying foundation of presidential bid. The story is on page 8. Transfers, teachers happy, head teachers welcome end to decolonization policy, saying it was a home breaker. The story is on the back page. And then we turn our attention to the Standard newspaper and mass action Ruto Raila lock horn. And President Ruto warns the opposition against shedding blood and damaging property during the planned Churera 4 protest, even as Raila Odinga criticizes Ruto's leadership style and insists that the public rallies will go on. That story is on page 4, 6 and 7 on the Standard. Baobab state agencies abated export of trees. That is on special report on page 10. Glamour at Kalasha Awards, find that on page 3. Ababu's huge task to clean up road in sports, you find that on page 12 and 13 on the Standard. The Star newspaper, how KAA sank 5 billion Kenya shillings in stalled airport projects, cash paid for 2 flagship initiatives. They were later abandoned under controversial circumstances. That story is on page 4 and 5. Over 50 deaths later, 1.3 billion Kenya shillings payout eludes slum residents. That story is on page 22. State assures Raila of security during protest. You find that on page 7. Cleaning Nairobi River, daunting tasks await the team. The story is on page 20. We are ready for junior secondary school, says school heads. The story is on page 9, and of course the main pictorial there. Ruto plays in praise. The president wasn't playing, he was praying in Embu as Raila revs up Nairobi for demos. Okay. Let's just move along to other newspapers from headlines from across the continent. The Namibian, obviously from Namibia, 21 SWAPO CC hopefuls removed. Gengob's 5-year shark plan far-fetched. And Supreme Court takes strict stance against corruption. That is what we have. The Sun, also from Namibia. Sanity prevails in SWAPO apps after CC vote recount. And the Sowetan, that is from South Africa, how I survived a river disaster. And then Business Daily, also from South Africa, nowhere left for Ramaphosa to hide. The Nation, that is from Nigeria, ex-depot price hits 225 naira per litre as petrol scarcity persist. And then the Punch from also Nigeria, Bauchi, Gombe fight over new oil wells. And then Buhari seeks improved security in ECOWAS region. I think I have that story in detail in just a bit. And then the Daily Monitor from Uganda, why Biarugamba's NSSF contract isn't renewed. The New Vision also from Uganda, absenteeism, government workers face pay cut. The Daily News from Zimbabwe, forget about ED Pali, CCC told. Newsday also from Zimbabwe, will disconnect houses from power, agreed. Okay, is it from Zimbabwe? Yes, this is from Zimbabwe. All right, because we know also Zimbabwe is having problems with its power. I think one of the key dams that supplies the hydroelectric power, the water levels so low, so they cannot provide power as they're supposed to. So Zimbabweans are perhaps being readied for some power cuts. Hopefully it will not get to the levels of what we see in South Africa. So let's just get on to with the news, and we start the bulletin from Nigeria. And a vital train link between the Nigerian capital Abuja and the southern city of Kaduna is due to reopen on Monday, 9 months after it was suspended. Late March, gunmen mined the track, forcing a train with more than 360 passengers to stop. At least 8 passengers were killed and dozens kidnapped. The link had been popular with passengers who feared traveling by road. Nigerian Railway Corporation is introducing new security measures, including surveillance devices to monitor the tracks and the trains. Passengers will also have to provide their national identification number. The government said the train attack was carried out by Islamist militant Boko Haram. And thousands of people across the Democratic Republic of Congo have took part in protest against the M23 rebel group, one of dozens fighting in the east of the country. The Catholic Church called for people to take to the streets, and much of the anger was directed at Rwanda, which Democratic Republic of Congo accuses of backing the M23 rebels, something Kigali has denied. As people streamed out of Sunday services across the country, they then marched for the peace. The Catholic Church is hugely influential in the country. Some church leaders are calling on Western countries to take a tougher stance against the Rwandan government for backing the M23 rebels. Banners at protests in Kinshasa opposed the balkanization of the Democratic Republic of Congo and spoke of the hypocrisy of the international community. And then we go to Ethiopia, where the government says it is normalizing life since the scene in the troubled Tigray region, where a 2-year war with rebels had shut down the economy, even as the question of Eritrean troops persist. On Thursday, Ethiopia's government communication service said a joint disarmament team composed of Ethiopian government representatives and those of Tigray armed combatants would be meeting in Shire town in Tigray to discuss a disarmament program for the Tigray's People Liberation Front. According to the office of the Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed, the federal government's authority were already fulfilling gradual supply of humanitarian aid, medical assistance, and return of displaced people. A dispatch said the priorities include Ethiopian forces helping with gathering harvest and supporting other agencies with rebuilding infrastructure quickly and helping civilians resume normal lives. The move follows as November 2nd cessation of hostilities deal between the Ethiopian government and the TPLF, who had been fighting since November 2020. The reconstruction will need at least $2 billion to repair damaged roads, schools, hospitals, bridges, and other infrastructure. Last week, the European Union provided $33 million for repairing some 8,500 schools vandalized during the war. EU Ambassador to Ethiopia, Roland Kobe, said the money will help 2 million children back in school, besides relaunching a school feeding program. The EU said it will work with the UN agencies for the project. The World Bank and the UN agencies had earlier in May announced a grant of $300 million for reconstructing war-ravaged infrastructure. And 6 years since South Sudan was admitted to the East African community, domestic problems, including weak institutions, have eaten into its will to integrate living neighbors, feeling the burden. South Sudan gained independence from Sudan in 2011, but plunged into a civil war 3 years later. Today, even at relative peace, it has been constantly on the brink of war. By joining the EAC, leaders had argued back in 2016 that the country could tap into the regional support, including the safety of neighbors with whom it could trade and improve lives. Instead, it has been a humanitarian burden, needing food aid and refuge for its citizens. The country has failed to implement the custom union and the common market protocols, two of the basic pillars of the East African community. In fact, more than 18 months since he was appointed the South Sudan minister in charge of East African Community Affairs, Deng Alor Koab, is yet to set foot in Arusha, the EAC headquarters, where the council meets regularly to make decisions. In Juba, delays in the ratification of protocols and non-implementation of ratified protocols have combined to impair the smooth enforcement and execution of the East African Community plans. Block decisions requiring amendments to national laws have also often remained outstanding for a long time. And in terms of trade integration, the Customs Union is operational within the East African Community, except in South Sudan, which is yet to fully meet the accession requirements to the East African Community. It has missed the deadlines twice. DRC will have at least 3 years to operationalize the Customs Union. West African leaders said on Sunday they would establish a regional peacekeeping force to intervene in member states to help restore security and constitutional order in a region that has witnessed several coups in the past 2 years. West and Central Africa has made strides in the past decade to shed its reputation as a coup belt, but the Economic Commission for West African States, ECOWAS, wants to do more to boost constitutional governments in its member states. ECOWAS did not give any details of how the force would be constituted, but said defense chiefs would meet next month to work out how it would operate. The ECOWAS leaders also expressed concern over the continued detention of 46 Ivorian soldiers in Mali. They asked Malian authorities to release the soldiers by the end of this month. If the soldiers were not released, ECOWAS leaders reserve the right, and they have taken the decision to take certain measures, but they would appeal and call on the authorities of Mali to release the soldiers. On Guinea, the leaders said the military authorities should immediately have an inclusive dialogue with all parties and politicians, and also express serious concern about the security situation in Burkina Faso, which had a coup in October. And just heading on to Burkina Faso now, and the military government has suspended the broadcast of France's RFI radio in the Sahel West Africa state over what it said were false reports and giving voice of Islamist militants. A statement from the government said on Saturday. The statement said RFI on Saturday broadcast a message from a leader of a militant group in which he threatened the population. It added that the decision to suspend its broadcasting was made without prior notice and without the implementation of the procedures put in place by the Burkina Faso's communications regulator. RFI Radio, Afrique Radio, which has one of the largest footprints across French-speaking Africa, added that it will explore ways to restore its broadcasting. The government said the RFI also repeated a press report which it denied that Burkina Faso's President Captain Ibrahim Traoré, who seized power in a coup in September, had said there had been an attempted coup to unseat him. And Burkina Faso is the second West African nation to suspend RFI's broadcast. The first is that of military government in neighboring Mali in March. The decision comes amid a backdrop of soured relations between France and its former West African colonies, Burkina Faso and Mali, over frustrations that France has not done enough to tackle Islamist insurgents who occupied northern Mali in 2012 and have spread to neighboring states. The prolonged insecurity led to political instability and military coups in August 2020 and May 2021 in Mali, and in January 2022 and September 2022 in Burkina Faso. And the latest from Somalia is that the Defense Ministry says the country's national army, supported by local clan militias, the ministry acknowledged that several security personnel were wounded during the army's recent operations. Abdullahi Ali Anod, Somalia's defense ministry spokesperson who talked with reporters on Saturday in the country's capital Mogadishu, said the army, backed by the locals, has captured 4 strategic villages from the Al-Qaeda-affiliated Islamist militants group of Al-Shabaab. The liberated villages are Gulane, Darussalam, Harga Dere, and Marba, located in the Hiram, the Middle Shabelle region. Marba is the last village in eastern Hiran that was under control of Al-Shabaab, according to Somali state-run agency SONA. And Tunisia's powerful labor union attacked the president's political and economic agenda on Saturday, including elections this month, saying it will no longer accept what it called a threat to democracy in its clearest challenge to him yet. The UGTT union says it has more than 1 million members and has proven able to paralyze the economy with strikes. It has at times backed President Kais Saied after he seized most powers last year, but on other occasions has voiced a tepid opposition. Saied shut down the elected parliament last year and moved to rule by decree before writing a new constitution that was passed earlier this year in a referendum and amid low turnout, setting up elections for a new weekend legislature on December the 17th. Most political parties are boycotting the poll, saying the new parliament will have no power and faulting procedures the president has decreed, which include bringing the Electoral Commission under his purview. Tabobe, who is the leader of the union, said the December election would have no color and taste, and as a result of Said's constitution and the vote lacked a national unanimity. The president's critics have denounced his moves as a coup and have held repeated street protests. Said says his actions were necessary to save Tunisia. And on the latest on Democratic Republic of Congo, 3 days mourning began in the DR Congo on Saturday after alleged massacre of civilians in the country's east, with the government now giving a death toll of more than 100 people. On Thursday, the government accused the M23 militia, with whom it locked in a months-long conflict, of slaughtering 50 people at Kishise, a village around 70 kilometers north of the city of Goma. The M23 hit back, saying the allegations were baseless and denying that each targeted civilians. At a Council of Ministers meeting on Friday, DRC's President Felix Tshisekedi condemned in the strongest terms the massacre of more than 100 compatriots of Kishise. A government spokesperson, Patrick Moyaya, said. And gunmen abducted 19 Muslim worshippers after attacking a mosque in the restive northwest Nigeria, police said on Sunday. The attackers stormed the mosque of Maigamji village in Katsina State during the evening prayers Saturday and carried out the kidnappings after shooting and wounding the imam and other worshipper, said local police spokesperson Gambo Issa. The 2 people wounded were being treated in the hospital. Northwest and central Nigeria have been terrorized by criminal gangs locally known as bandits, who village raids, steal cattle, and kidnap for ransom and burn homes after looting supplies. Hostages are usually released after ransom is paid to the gangs, which take refuge in the vast Rugu forest. It straddles 4 states in northwest Nigeria, including that of Katsina. And South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa said on Sunday it was up to the governing party's national executive to decide his future in the face of allegations of misconduct against him. A day after his spokesperson said he would not resign, Ramaphosa, who said he would attend an executive committee meeting scheduled for Monday, is fighting for his political survival after a panel of experts found that he may have violated his oath of office. Their inquiries relate to allegations that large sums of foreign currency were hidden at Ramaphosa's private firm, and he failed to report the money missing when it was stolen in 2020. Ramaphosa has denied wrongdoing and has not been charged with any crimes. He has said the money stolen was the proceeds from the sales of buffaloes and far less than the millions of dollars alleged when the theft came to light in June. The media has dubbed the affair Farmgate. The president's allies have rallied around him after 2 cabinet ministers considered rivals called for him to quit. On Saturday, his spokesman said the panel's finding will be challenged. The governing African National Congress Party's National Working Committee was meeting in Johannesburg on Sunday to discuss the panel's report. And that is the latest news from the continent of Africa. You are now up to date. A very good morning to you. And now I'm joined by Wanda Wesunga from Nairobi. Wanda, a very good morning to you.
Good morning, Miriam. How are you?
I'm very well. How are you this Monday morning?
I'm very okay. I'm doing well.
All right, very well. So let's just pick on some of the stories that you're listening. So I want us to start with one of these stories from Nigeria, these attacks that happened at a mosque. Remember the times when there were increased attacks, especially around Nairobi, and it forced the government to give orders and directives that, church services and any kind of service, at least there should be a security detail. I know in my church, when you But the attacks in Nigeria, in mosques, in churches, like when you come here every Monday, there has to be a news of a church that was, attacked and some worshippers were abducted, or a mosque that was attacked on Friday, or like the story I've heard here. And we know the issue of abductions and attacks. The insecurity in Nigeria has really, really gone up. So I don't know why this continues to happen, and there are no mitigating, efforts being put in place to ensure that Nigerians are safe. I don't know, how would you advise the Nigerian government to handle this runaway insecurity?
Yes. You can hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, thank you. Now, this is very sad that at least we are talking about 16 worshippers who have lost their lives after being, and then some are reported to have been kidnapped. Now, when you look into the nature on how these attacks were conducted, it is not something new in Nigeria. That we have had a case of people moving on motorcycles, then they will unleash attacks on civilians. There are times when they will go into these worshipping houses, either a church or a mosque, then they will unleash the attacks, of which if something has been done more than one time, then those in position of addressing it need to address it then at that point, because it's not an ambush. It's not something that they have never heard of it heard of it. Therefore, the only thing that we can advise the government of Nigeria, because this is not something new, then let them sit down with the religious leaders, because this is a case of a certain faith either feeling more superior than the other faith. Therefore, if a certain faith feels more superior than another faith, the chances are that even during preaching or the teachings, either in a church or in a mosque, they will tend to be radicalized, or they will tend to preach in a sense, or teach in a sense that you're being told that certain faith is better than this one, or you're being told we are better than the others, or these ones are either demonic and we are the ones who are godly. Therefore, I wish that the government of Nigeria get hold of the religious leaders, in this case, the Muslim and the Christians. Then one, they get to make them realize that it is their sole responsibility during their teaching not to teach any kind of teachings that will paint the other faith as not important or are not godly. The other thing, insecurity in Nigeria is not, it's not something new to us or new to the government. Therefore, still, the government should be advised with those in charge of security to ensure that every Nigerians are secured. And it becomes very bad when worshippers are attacked. In this case, these are people that are not armed. These are people that are not fighting back. These are people that are only worshipping. Therefore, the security agencies, the security team should up their game and ensure that all Nigerians' safety is put on the forefront list.
And then also something else just to do with the insecurity in Nigeria. There's a train that was derailed sometimes back in March, and a lot of people were abducted by the same gunmen. And I think the last batch of those people were just released a couple of days ago. So now the government has said that it will, the train will start operating. You wonder, when you take any train, be it, I don't know where it's going, but when you take any train, the Kenyan trains that I know, there's always a security officer inside the trains. whether it is the commuter trains, whether it is the long distance train, the new one or the old one, there's always the presence of, police officers, not just one, but a good amount. So just in case of any kind of insecurity, they're there to respond adequately. So you would wonder, even as we look at the churches and mosques and the attack on these, places of worship, why, knowing very well the level of insecurity in Nigeria, especially that route that this train, runs through, and the government will allow for a train carrying so many people in an area that is already very insecure to go on about its business without having a presence of security forces inside that train? I don't know how they do things in Nigeria.
It is the ignorance of the highest degree. That okay, it's something that unimaginable. It's something that nobody should do. But at times, we the citizens, we behave in a way that okay, we the citizens in most of times we behave like small kids. But if the grown up, in this case, the government now does not ensure that everything is put in place, then citizens can easily hurt. Mm-hmm. Like like you've seen a case of the siphoning of that is petrol in our country, that is Kenya. That even if we know it's dangerous, we still go ahead and do it. Therefore, what happens with the citizen is something that nobody can explain what normally happens. Whether educated or not, it still happens. Therefore, I'll still go back to the government, that it's either the government to ensure that citizens are well informed, and even if they are well informed, that it is still a responsibility of the government to ensure that such details are taken care of. Because citizens will always be citizens, and they'll always do things that you'll question. Which a good example is what you're talking about, the siphoning of petrol in these petrol the cars or lorries, that they will burn or they'll explode and burn some person today to death, but tomorrow when we have such an accident again, we'll still have people go there. Mm-hmm. Therefore, that security detail is missing, and citizens still going ahead to board such kind of trains. It is a problem that nobody knows what happens. Okay. Whether educated or not, citizens will still do such things.
All right. And a lot of them, those who were using the trains, because the road had become very insecure, so they thought with the train they'll be more safer. But unfortunately, the security operators in Nigeria are just lagging. It's just so lacking that people just get exposed, and it's quite unfortunate. So anyway, President Buhari, I think he's just checked out. He's just waiting for the elections in February, and he can go take his rest. He's not even bothered because there's no efforts being made to actually address the issue of insecurity in Nigeria. But I will digress for now. And 3 days of mourning have began on Saturday in the Democratic Republic of Congo after the alleged massacre of civilians in the country's east, with the government now placing the death toll at 100. Remember when we were having the conversation on Friday, and there were reports that renewed violence had broken out, and of course these deaths are being the M23, as usual, is being accused of, being responsible for this death. So yesterday, church leaders in the Democratic Republic of Congo, the Catholic Church, which we know is has a very powerful and prominent voice as far as the Democratic Republic of Congo is concerned, called for the people to take to the streets, and so they were to direct their anger to Rwanda, which Democratic Republic of Congo has accused. So yesterday, the Catholic church leaders in the DRC were leading the congregants to protest and to echo the voice of their president, Felix Tshisekedi, who has been accusing Rwanda's government of supporting N23. So yesterday they took to the streets, and especially they are calling on the Western countries to take tougher stance against the Rwandan government for backing the M23 rebels. So they are saying the Western and the international community are hypocrites because of the way they have been handling, especially these accusations that are being leveled against Rwanda. And they're saying, if this was any other leader from any other country, we would have already have seen some sanctions, we would have already seen some actions being taken. But they're saying the international community is very hypocritical as far as how they've been handling this conflict in the DRC is concerned, and especially how they've been handling the alleged Rwanda's participation in this, in supporting the M23 rebels.
It is very sad that we are still losing lives. But when you look at the church going on the streets and the church developing a urge or an interest of either crying and calling for the West to come in and support or put sanctions on the Rwanda, that one is not going to happen. Yes, at least they're on the streets, they're demonstrating, they're showing their anger and disappointment. But calling on the West to come in and put sanctions on the Rwandan government is not something that's going to happen on only one ground. That we have always said or talked about it is that chances are the Western world cares less what happens in Africa and what happens to Africans. And chances are we will not even have even a single person or a single nation condemning what is happening in DRC Congo, because it is none of their business. They care less what's happening there. In either case, they will probably care about the minerals that are there. How do we get these minerals? How do they support our industries, our technology? But if the people in Africa kill each other, it's none of their business. Now, I wish that as a way of sorting out these issues, I wish that Africans get to a realization that they still can exploit whatever they're having. They still can steal from each other in the sense of minerals and all those things, but they should not steal lives from each other. That even if we have these cobalt and all these minerals, that someone is interested in them, they still can go ahead and steal all those minerals from each other. But fighting to steal each other's lives, it is the worst thing that we Africans keep doing, which is very terrible and very bad. Therefore, the M23 and the insecurity issues in DRC Congo, it's like it's now getting back to square zero. They're now getting back to serious fighting. And it even now makes the peace process just a formality where people go sit down, talk about issues, then they go home. They only cry, yell, then they go home. Therefore, it is a case of the Africans, or we Africans, both in Rwanda, the M23, the Tshisekedi and his government, cut across, that they come to a realization that they can exploit their riches, but they should not steal each other's lives.
All right. Very well, and perhaps we shall look at that story during our next conversation. So another story that I think is quite a huge sign of relief is that the Ethiopian government says it is normalizing life seen in the troubled Tigray region, where a 2-year war with rebels there had shut down the economy, even as the question of Eritrean troops persists. So it's not very clear if the Eritrean forces have left the Tigray region, but there has been some meetings, and the Ethiopian government has been meeting with leaders of the TPLF, and the disarmament program has continued since the last of this, the disarmament agreement was made in South Africa. And according to the Office of Prime Minister, the federal government authorities were already fulfilling gradual supply of humanitarian aid, and they're saying even the army of the Ethiopian government will be participating, the ones who were causing part of this, this conflict, and who caused a lot of untold suffering to the people. They're saying even the army now will be used to rebuild the infrastructure and to help the civilians resume normal lives. What lessons can we draw from the conflict in Ethiopia and the mediation and where they are today? You're muted.
Sorry. Now, Ethiopians are, when you look at what is happening from the word go, it's like Ethiopians were tired of what was happening. Their readiness to cease fire, their struggles to rebuild. It tells of a story of a country and a people who feel sorry and ashamed of what happened, and they should be encouraged to further rebuild and grow as a country. Then probably this will be a lesson to them that in future, if we have issues, let us not resort into fighting. We are brothers, we are sisters. There is as much as we can disagree, but let us never get to a point where we destroy what we have built by our own sweat and blood. Therefore, they're trying to tell a story that they were sorry and they are ready to join hands and rebuild their nation.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and while we were having this conversation, I think, was it yesterday, and we're looking at some of the conflicts in the Greater Lakes region here in Africa, and of course the role the external factors play, but most importantly, some of the internal factors that have allowed for even the external factors to find their way inside the local politics of these different countries in the continent. So we've seen how this process in Ethiopia has gone, and a lot of the mediation, I think, was done here in Africa by the leadership, President Uhuru Kenyatta, and former president of Nigeria, Olusegun Obasanjo, and other leaders from across the continent. So basically, African solution to African problem. I think the AU spearheaded this, and we've seen how this has happened. But also, after the mediation process, we've seen how Ethiopians themselves have taken over this mediation, and they've owned the process, and like you've said, they were tired of fighting, because why were they even fighting within each other? And it's not like the TPLF wanted to go and have their own country. They still want to be part of the bigger fabric of the Ethiopian community. And so we've seen them how they've taken over this mediation, and they've owned the process, and they're trying to find their own internal solutions and work out the rest of the mediation process within themselves, because they understand better why and what should be done, they themselves. And they've perhaps taken the responsibility, and now we see the army will be part of the people who will be helping in the rebuilding. I think that is part of responsibility taking on the government side, realizing these are our people, and this conflict was unnecessary, and now that it has happened, we also have a stake, and we must make sure that these people are taken care of so that we're able to rebuild and heal and come together. But in the conflict in the DRC, we're not seeing any level of ownership. All we see is the mediators trying to push even the people in the Democratic Republic of Congo. But okay, that is different, because another country is also being accused of interfering there. But also, just even in the example, let me just give the example of the South Sudan and where they are today, and how this mediation process and these stakeholders have been trying to push for coming together, have been trying to push for this leadership to just get their act together, try to implement a part of the revitalized peace agreement of 2018. And it's like they've been pushed. They've refused to own this process and say, Kenya has done this much, USA has done this much, African Union has pushed us this much, the Pope, for heaven's sakes, has pushed us this much. But now, as the leadership of South Sudan, we must now therefore take up the rest of the mediation process, the rest of everything else that needs to be done for the interest of our people. So what can perhaps the countries that are experiencing some kind of internal turmoils perhaps get from what we've been seeing play out in Ethiopia, and just part of it owning their part of the mess and just having the willingness to put the people first, with a good example in South Sudan?
At times, I feel like we don't have proper military training. Our military are only taught how to fight and take commands. But chances our militaries are not taught how to go beyond taking a command and fight. Because any African country that probably has some mineral or some natural riches, when you look at how the military behaves in such countries, then the military has been crafted in a way that they only take a command and fight. And they'll only take a command and fight in favor of the regime. And different from that, then they can only organize a coup. Therefore, I feel like the military in Africa, the training, the manual that we are using to train our military, and the leadership of our military men, our brothers in uniform, need to be looked at, and especially the leadership bit. That the leadership of our military, chances they are not in a position to sit down with the leadership and advise them accordingly. But instead, the leadership sits down and sings to the tune of the leadership at the expense of the citizens. Therefore, that's the only area that I feel like we have a problem with, that we have designed our military to be a team of people that fight on a command. And the leadership that issues the command, that sits on the table, on a table with the top leadership of the country, that's the political leadership of the country, is not a leadership that advises the country on how, on anything to do with the fighting and the insecurity. Therefore, the only advice in this case that the military leaders manual, and especially the leadership, it should not be a case of appointing someone as a leader, but such person should be taken through the leadership skills, the humanitarian skills, so that they don't just assume the positions of power and leadership, but instead be in a position to take care of the interests of the citizens. Because in this case, our military only take care of the interests of the leadership, that is the presidency, and forget about the interest of the citizens and the whole country.
Mm-hmm. Very well. Yes, indeed. So I think that is a good thing that is happening in Ethiopia. And yeah, I think that perhaps there's a difference between the military, like you've said, and how the training that a lot of these people get. Because when you look at the conflict-ridden countries and the roles that sometimes the military take and some of the accusations that have been leveled, for South Sudan, it is a special case. These are people that perhaps never went through some proper military training, as you know, how they were drawn from different sides. And the government has been accused of using the same military to terrorize and torture and kill and maim and rape and do all kinds of things to the people they're supposed to be protecting. The military is supposed to protect the people of the country, but unfortunately, they are used in that regard. So when the military of a country is compromised and they're not properly, they're not professional. They're not professionals as far as, being in the military and having the required discipline is concerned. So that also poses, I think, a security to a country by itself, because that is what has been playing out in South Sudan. So I don't know if the training they received and now the unified force, if that will make any difference. But we've seen the insecurity still persist in South Sudan. But when you even go to a place like Cameroon, where the government forces under President Paul Biya are fighting the Anglophones who were trying to secede the English-speaking region. And the military has been accused of the ones of burning churches, raping women, and doing all kinds of things. So you wonder, what kind of military is this? But, they're fighting other militants from this other side, because this other side is also is not innocent, because they also do certain things and they also commit the same atrocities. But it is an expectation that perhaps the disciplined forces are supposed to handle things a bit differently. So I think when you bring in the issue of the training and the kind of training maybe our militaries in this continent go through, and then it raises questions. But I think we have a good one here. I want to believe in Kenya, our disciplined forces, I think they're one of the best. I want to believe that.
Yeah, the Kenyan discipline is indeed discipline. I think the only area that our men in uniform have an issue is with the police, that is the internal. But when you look at the military in Kenya, that's the Kenya Defense Forces, the military in general, they tend to act in a different way or a bit different from the police forces. It's their police forces that you will easily see them fighting, tear gassing, shooting small kids and such things. Yeah. But you'll rarely see the military involved in such things. Therefore, I feel like the military in Kenya is a bit disciplined, and the chances are they tend to advise the presidency or the president accordingly. Because if you are having an issue with the leadership and how they advise the president, then the maritime conflict between Kenya and Somalia could have developed or led to something different. The Migingo issue, Kenya-Uganda, probably could have been a different story. Therefore, it tells a story of the leadership of the military in Kenya, probably being smart enough, being trained enough, and able to advise the president accordingly, such that we don't just end up picking unnecessary fights that ends up leading into the civilians being tortured and killed unnecessarily.
Yes, indeed. And I think because of the way the military in this country handles itself, even they have earned some good level of respect, from Kenyans. You be in these roads and during traffic, and perhaps there's with the police, Kenyans are used to. It is wrong to disrespect any kind of force. I think they are a representation of the government, and while they're there, they're holding a certain level of authority, and they should be respected. But, Kenyans really, but should there be like a military truck or a military personnel somewhere within the vicinity, even the roads will clear, because there's some level of respect that comes automatically by them being at a certain place. And I think it is because of how they carry themselves. And we are lucky that the military in this country has not been politicized. And, would you not say that?
Indeed, we are very lucky, and I like this example that even if youths are rioting or demonstrating somewhere, and they have closed the road. This one I witnessed somewhere in along Kitale, that we had rowdy youths that were protesting. They were on the road. They had even blocked the road. But when the military came in, the youths were ready to. They rushed on that road. They removed everything on that road. They cleared the road. Then the military could even have one or two words with them. Then they left. Therefore, it's true as you're putting it. We have the best men in military.
And I think they've earned their respect because of how they carry themselves out. So that's how I get to sleep in my house peacefully at night, because I know some people are in charge and I'm safe. Okay. Now, other things are happening as far as security is concerned is that Somalia's defense ministry says the country's national army, supported by local clan militias, have seized control of several strategic villages of Al-Shabaab, and they've taken over and they're making strides as far as the fight against Al-Shabaab is concerned. And this is a story that we have been carrying out. The place I have a problem with is this clan militias. And when we were having a conversation here on Friday, and I remember one of the panelists, Omar, she's always a delight to have on the show. And, as we were looking at the issue in Democratic Republic of Congo, and I think she raised a very important point that perhaps sometimes we don't look at while we're discussing the rebel groups in the Democratic Republic of Congo, because the focus has been trained on the M23, but we're forgetting the government is also being accused of supporting one one of the rebel groups, the FDLR, and that is what Paul Kagame is having a problem with, and I think he brought that out. And so Omar said, which I think it's very important, that the government should not be in bed with any kind of rebel group, should not be working or operating using any kind of rebel group or militia. So if all rebel groups are not wanted in the DRC, so that should be the case, and so others should not be favored at the expense of others. So my issue with the Somalia is the government now, and I do understand the intricate security situation that Somalia finds itself. So it's using the clan militias. I don't know the dangers of this, and perhaps once they've been able to drive out this Al-Shabaab, will this clan militia pose another insecurity for the government of Somalia?
That's a case of a child playing with a candle that is a candle of fire. Because any other time, this kid might end up getting the finger of that fire. Like, it's even termed as a clan militia. Mm-hmm. And this clan militia is working with the government. Why then do they just get that group and put them in the army and call them the army instead of calling them a clan? Case or in either case, or in a scenario that the government is in a disagreement or not in agreement with the very clan, then the militia will turn against the government. Mm-hmm. Therefore, this is very dangerous, that you cannot, because you look at it, this clan militia will end up being trained the art of war by the government because they are working together. Mm-hmm. And if you are working together, I'll teach you and tell you now, when you want to attack, make sure you do this, and this, or take the left route as I take the right one.
And assume the government has to share some level of intelligence with them.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Therefore, it's very dangerous, dangerous, and it can bite back at some point later.
It's a double-edged, I think, sword here. If this, yes. And I think the suggestion you've given there perhaps could work. Let's integrate them and have them as part of the official forces in Somalia, so that we try in removing this tag of militia in them. Because if we leave them, and we know Somalia, the fact that they speak one language and they worship under one religion, clanism has been a major problem in Somalia's politics. We know that is what caused problems, yes. So if we're having these clan militias, I think this is a ticking time bomb. Over time, this will come back to bite the Somali's government. They might be fomenting another problem that they will not know how to handle.
In fact, this one will be very terrible, because this clan militia will know A to Z about the government military, their secrets and everything. Because today they are working together, they are sharing everything in common. So they are learning from each other, and they know each. I mean, they'll end up knowing each other so well. It will be very hard for the government to counteract and deal with these militia if it turns against them.
All right, very well. Wanda Wisonga, it's always a pleasure. So we will take a short break, and then we will come back at the top of the hour with the tough questions that will be led by Dr. David Matanga. Thank you so much, Wanda. Thank you so much for watching. Don't go too far. We shall be back. This has been Good Morning Africa. My name is Miriam Mugutu. Have a very good morning.